The internet is the lifeblood of communications across the world. Whether you're watching your favourite movie or sharing breaking news with millions, the internet plays a vital part in our everyday lives. But what if it was switched off? Cutting access to the internet is a technique being used by more and more governments across the world. But why? During the Arab Spring of 2011, the Egyptian government instated what is known as the first internet shutdown. The aim was to disrupt those who use the web, to organise, coordinate and disseminate information about the uprising. Since then, many authoritarian governments have taken inspiration and have enforced internet shutdowns of their own. According to digital rights group Access Now, there were at least 182 shutdowns in 2021, spanning 34 different countries.
If you see like the more global trend of the past like 5-6 years, you will see that the amount of shutdowns has been consistently going up, and it keeps going up as people use the internet more and more. Every year we see countries that hadn't shut down the internet before doing it for the first time. So this is a global trend that keeps rising, sadly.
Governments don't usually give truthful explanations for shutdowns, leaving citizens demanding questions as to why they were left without access to communications for days, months, or even years, like in the case of Kashmir.
Mainly, internet shutdowns happen all over the world as a mean to control the flow of information when governments and other actors that control in the internet infrastructure don't want information to be available or people to communicate and organize. So that happens when there are protests, that happens when there are elections, that also happens in many instances of political instability.
In February of 2021, the Tatmadaw, Myanmar's national military, staged a coup in response to the democratic election of leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Millions of citizens took to the streets in anti-junta protests. In response, a nationwide internet shutdown was instated, forcing telecom providers to disable access to the internet on a daily basis, leaving the nation cut off from the outside world. By leaving the communications air-gapped within the country, it was extremely hard for the information on the violent suppression of protesters to get out.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a researcher and for us as an organization, the most important aspect is the human rights violation, because sometimes if there are like some regional shutdowns, that means that if you have people living in that region and the region is entirely cut off, you can be months without knowing what's happening to them. So the effects, not only the logistical effect, but also the psychological and the emotional effects of that are very damaging.
The effects of a shutdown can also bite back at the governments who impose them. With prospects of significant financial loss and international condemnation, orders for a blackout nearly always come from the top of the chain. According to an online calculation tool by non-profit NetBlocks, the cost of a single-day shutdown in a country like Myanmar can reach over $20 million. Yet some governments still choose to go ahead with their plans.
So depending on the severity of the shutdown, it can paralyze the economy. We're talking about transactions that cannot be done, people not being able to access online shopping or doing internet transfers of money. And we are using all of that every day. So the economy takes a punch like very severe, and if this goes on for many days, like each of those days, we're talking about millions of dollars being lost.
People living under a blackout used to have little means to get around them, but as more and more people are starting to grow aware of shutdowns, resistance has increased. Communities of open source hackers and organizations have developed software that can evade certain types of shutdowns. Take Tor for instance, a tool initially conceptualized by the US Department of Defense that bounces and encrypts the user's internet traffic over multiple countries to preserve anonymity and evade censorship. And Brianna, a decentralized peer-to-peer messaging app backed by imprisoned WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. It can work without access to the internet at all. Although this type of software works well in certain instances, it does have its own set of challenges.
Like, I think that a very handy example is to look at this whole discussion about what's happening with Twitter and people wanting to go to Mastodon, which is decentralized. Mastodon also has a very severe content moderation problem. It is a different content moderation problem than the one that Twitter has. And the problem is that by being decentralized, the users themselves are moderating the content, and in every instance, content moderation looks different. What does happen for both open source and for decentralized models is that since it is in the hands of people to control how things are work, like for open source, you can have people auditing the code constantly. For the centralized models, if an instance gets killed, you can get a new one. So in terms of censorship specifically, they are harder to censor, but they bring other sort of issues that are still problematic for freedom of speech.
With relaxed sanctions for countries that violate the human rights of their citizens, it's been left up to the people to fight back against internet shutdowns in the digital game of cat and mouse, constantly finding ways to evade forms of censorship and get their voices heard. The only question is, will governments be able to keep up?